Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Conceptual Design and Streetscape Strategy of Pacific Avenue Project Virtual Open House. My name is Shengxu Li. I'm a community planner at the City of Brandon. With us is Sam Van Huysen, the traffic and the transportation planner with the city, and Marsha Ng, as well as Brent McMurtry from Urban Systems to present and answer questions on the open house. Before we started, I would first like to acknowledge that we're on Treaty 2 territory and the homeland of the Métis Nation. We would also like to acknowledge the generous funding for this project from the Manitoba government through Building Sustainable Communities program. During today's open house live stream, if you have any questions or comments regarding this project or would like to follow up after today's event, please send your email to s.li@brandon.ca. We will be able to answer your questions after the presentation. There are two main purposes for today's open house. First, the project team would like to provide an update on the Pacific project, including project background and public consultation. Also, would like to introduce to you about the selected conceptual design for the Pacific Avenue corridor. Here's an overview of today's presentation. The project started in late August of last year, 2020. The city retained urban system consulting firm to undertake a conceptual design study and complete a streetscape strategy of Pacific Avenue. The project encompasses the areas surrounding Pacific Avenue between 1st Street and 18th Street. It is intended to implement an action item in the downtown sector plan to explore options that improve the multimodal connectivity and promote economic development along the Pacific Avenue corridor. Here's the timeline of this project. Right now, we are in the final stage of this project. The project team conducted a series of public and stakeholder engagement events, which are listed on the screen, to collect the information and obtain input from the public and the stakeholders for this project. The project team did an online survey to get a public opinion on the pop-up bike lane, which was installed on the north side of Pacific Avenue last summer using the on-street parking lane. The survey result shows half of the respondents use vehicle as their regular mode of transportation, and the other half use cycling and walking. The survey also shows a polarized opinion in terms of the support of the pop-up bike lane. Again, another split of opinions from the survey on whether the bike lane adds value to the community. An online interactive map tool was also created for the public to identify what they like or don't like about the current road conditions of the Pacific Avenue, as well as making recommendations. Some of the highlighted comments include: it can be difficult to cross during the peak traffic time. Sidewalks are missing in some segments of the road. Bike lane needs to be separated from the pedestrians. The project team also held corridor visioning workshop to engage internal and external stakeholders in this project. Connected, safe, and active are top 3 project values emerging from the workshops. During the workshops, stakeholders participate in visual surveys to provide feedback on the design elements This is an example of the questions asked to participants to show what characteristics resonated with them. Now I will turn to my colleagues in urban system to introduce the conceptual design options.
Great, thanks, Zhengzhu. So after we received all of the feedback from both the public and stakeholders, we as a project team went and looked at different options that we thought might meet these goals of the community and goals of the project along the corridor. And so with that, we developed 3 different options. So the first option that you were looking at is to add bidirectional bikeway on the north side of Pacific. And so this bikeway would be separated from motor vehicle travel lanes and would require removing on-street parking on the north side of the street. Some of the other elements to improve the streetscape that would be explored for this option are curb bulges at intersections and key locations along the corridor mid-block, as well as other landscaping features such as street trees and other planting opportunities. So if you go to the next slide, Zhengzhu. The second option that we looked at is the option to have a multi-use pathway on the north side. And so something you'll see that's common with both option 1 and option 2 is the use of the north side of Pacific. One of the major considerations for this being the preferred side for a two-way facility is with Pacific being the last road east-west before the railway, there's no through intersections, and so the number of conflict points between people walking and biking on the north side is significantly fewer than on the south side of the street. So this option has a facility that is shared by people walking and biking on the north side of the street. So you can see in the images on your screen, there's a couple of different configurations that would be considered along the corridor. One with on-street parking running parallel, and then other locations where curb bulges would be introduced, providing an opportunity for improved landscaping or streetscaping, whether that's street trees, seating areas, or other streetscape enhancements. And then on the south side of the curb with this option, since there's less space required for the shared facility on the north side, there's additional space for the sidewalk and streetscape features on the south side. Go to the next option. And then the last option that we are looking at here is option 3, which was unidirectional bikeways with bikeway on both the north side and south side running in the same direction as motor vehicle traffic adjacent. This option, because the buffer space and the bike lanes take up a little bit more space when they're separated, limits on-street parking to only on the south side of the street, and also reduces some of the opportunities for improved streetscape elements and curb bulges along the corridor. So with this option, you can see that some street trees may be possible on the north side of the street, but no streetscape or really small streetscape features would be offered or would be available on the south side of the street. Pass it over to Sam.
Awesome, thanks, Brent. So yeah, in order to proceed with the evaluating of the various options, the project team came up with a set of criteria to form the technical evaluation. These subjects represent a variety of different technical areas of interest and comparison for each of the options that were presented. They include connectivity, safety, social impact, impact to emergency services, pedestrian comfort and accessibility, cyclist comfort, motor vehicle travel, impact to transit, streetscape, business access, parking and loading impacts, implementation and phasing, street maintenance, including snow removal and sweeping, the cost, utilities, and of course the public feedback. A rating system was used of very good, good, neutral, satisfactory, poor, and worst, and they were given to each of the different options in each category. During the previous round of engagement with the public and stakeholders, they were offered the opportunity to provide a rank of their 5 most important evaluation criteria. And so as we go through this list, the ratings were summed in each option and an overall comparison came forward. The overall rank on the technical evaluation resulted in option number 1 being the best option, with option number 3 being the next best, and option number 2 being the third best. Of course, each option has their own qualities that make them a little better than others in some areas. And the results for the best option come with the aggregate number of high scoring ranks receiving the highest preference. So I'll turn it back over to Shengju to talk about the second round of public engagement.
Thank you, Sam. In order to engage the community on the evaluating those conceptual design options, the project team also held online webinars and a survey to collect public input. When asking people's regular travel mode to downtown, 82% of the participants indicated they normally travel by driving, and 17% indicated they bike or walk. The most supported design option was option 2, with 40% of respondents strongly supportive of the option and 22% somewhat supportive. Option 1 was the second most supported option, with 25% of respondents strongly supportive of the option and 32% somewhat supportive. Option 3 was the least supported. Here are top 5 evaluation criteria that were identified by respondents. They are safety, impacts to parking and loading, pedestrian comfort and accessibility, motor vehicles, and cyclist comfort, which is tied with the motor vehicles. When asked to rank the provided design options, option 2 was the number 1 most preferred design. However, when responses were weighted, option 2 and option 1 were very close. Now I will turn to my colleague Sam to introduce the selected design.
Thanks, Shengju. So again, based upon all the collected and analyzed data, and of course the public feedback that we received as a part of our stakeholder engagement previously, the project team selected option 1 and option 2 as recommended design options, and that an integration of these 2 designs would be completed for the selected design. And so as we've seen, there are components of each design that are important to this corridor, and we have done our best to incorporate them into the final design. Selected design. So normally with this process, this public engagement session would take place in person with a full-size plan laid out on a nice long table so that we could all gather around and see the concept in its entirety. But given the current restrictions we're under, the project team will do our best to take you through the selected design starting at the eastern limit of the project area, that being near First Street and Pacific Avenue. So of course everyone, most people will be well aware that the city, along with the province, completed the intersection improvements at First Street, where Pacific Avenue is now connected to the multi-use trails across the First Street Bridge over the Assiniboine River and CP rail lines. With the new design of that bridge, there was a raising of the road crown, which caused the alignment of Pacific Avenue to S-curve in the manner that you see on the right of your screen. This provides ample spot for what we'll call a gateway feature location. We'll talk a little bit more about that after the selected design presentation. But then the road kind of curves back into the alignment of Pacific Avenue that we know. So the design commences at about 2nd Street, where the eastern leg of the selected design incorporates the multi-use pathway on the north side of Pacific Avenue that we had seen from option 2. It provides preserving the parking on both sides of the street. course, moving to the west, the elements of option 2 continue past 3rd Street, and here you'll see some of the existing trees would have to be removed on the north side to make way for the multi-use trail. But of course, ample space still exists on the south side, and opportunity for trees on private property can be incorporated into the design elements of redevelopment as necessary. Bulb outs, of course, are proposed at the location where parking is not feasible due to the spacing of accesses, and these form part of the traffic calming that would be along Pacific Avenue. As we move further to the west, we'll see here at 5th Street, we see the multi-use trail transitioning into the bidirectional bikeway from option 1. So the existing driveway accesses are maintained and signed accordingly to ensure that vehicles will watch for cyclists. And trees, once again, are present on the north side due to the boulevard space between the on-street bikeway and the northerly sidewalk. Continuing to move west, bulb outs are continuing to be present on the south side at intersections, providing ample space for pedestrian visibility and shorter crossing distances to improve safety in the area. These bulb outs carry around the corner on each street intersection with Pacific Avenue. Okay, continuing west, we see our first full stop control being maintained at the 8th Street Bus Mall. And the new aspect of the design will be the left turning points for crossing cycle traffic that you'll see at intersections along this corridor. Of course, they're painted on the pavement to give an increased presence to motorists who would otherwise be unaware of the increased cycle traffic and the potential conflict. The design recognizes the existing sidewalk improvements that the city had recently made along the north side of Pacific Avenue between 9th and 13th Streets. And of course, we maintain that infrastructure by swapping the boulevard to the north side of the sidewalk. A full stop controlled intersection at 10th Street is proposed. This intersection being seeing higher, we're anticipating higher than normal pedestrian and cycle traffic accessing the north-south corridors that connect with Pacific Avenue. Some of the features along the corridor that we'll see throughout the streetscape elements include the planter box locations. The city, as we may know, the city of Brandon has an extensive planter box program that we spread throughout the city to improve the beautification of our streets. And we have ample locations for those to be placed along this corridor as well. Again, stop control is being proposed at 13th Street. Again, due to the increased presence of pedestrian and cycle conflict, those making crossings at that point. On-street parking is formalized on the south side of Pacific Avenue to ensure the efficient use of space. There are some dead zones that we currently see where no parking is allowed, and by improving the curbing and the bulb outs, it helps us to improve the efficiency there. 3.5 meter lane design was chosen for the travel lanes on Pacific Avenue to ensure that vehicles traveling on this collector street can do so comfortably, but also cautiously, so as to be alerted to the increased presence of cyclists, pedestrians, and other multimodal devices. The parking lane design width, again, is proposed at 2.6 meters. And that matches our off-street parking standard width for a parking stall in our parking lot. So providing comfort there to access vehicles in conjunction with moving traffic. As the corridor approaches the westerly limit of with 18th Street, the bikeway transitions back into a multi-use trail. Lost here. Sorry, as the corridor approaches the westerly intersection with 18th Street, the bikeway transitions back into a multi-use trail to connect with the planned improvements at the Daly overpass. And of course, on this one, you can see with those planned improvements at Daly, they do have plans for some open space there, and some options for a gateway feature could also be incorporated as well. So I'll turn it back over to Brent or Marcia from Urban Systems to talk a little bit about what gateway features are.
Sure. With the gateway feature, the intent of them are to essentially bookmark both ends of Pacific Avenue. We're trying to create a heightened entry experience for users and to start to build kind of a unique sense of identity for Pacific Avenue. Much of our design inspiration for the concept comes from the study of the architectural heritage along Pacific Avenue, and also the broader context of the downtown Brandon. As well, we've combined it with an industrial influence that references the city's rail history and the site's proximity to the existing railway. In option 1, what you'll see is a more influence of the architectural history of the downtown, and we have some strong vertical elements in our design, as you can see with the columns showcasing Pacific Avenue, and then as well as the downtown branding. Next slide, please. With option 2, it has more of an industrial flair and a connection to the railway with more of a horizontal design and larger footprint. The creative use of our steel provides both a balance to the brick and sandstone, and also adds another material that can be used creatively as a core component or a design accent. The steel is clearly more prevalent in this design concept than the previous option, in that we're using the steel to form a gabion structure that holds rocks in reference to the nearby Assiniboine River, and then it provides the foundation for the steel letter that contributes to the identity of the corridor. There are steel integrated in each of the options to essentially form the City of Brandon's logo and the inclusion of the downtown Brandon branding. Next slide, please. These are some of the streetscape element examples that we've selected for the corridor. The hardscape elements were selected to enhance and mimic the feel of the older sandstone brick buildings in the area. And we were also trying to bring the inspiration to the ground with texture and color that would work well with the feel of the older building. With the plant material, they were selected based on trying to have a year-round interest with color and texture that would work well in an urban polluted area where you could get influence of salt and pedestrian traffic and car pollution. Also, we selected plant materials based on height to ensure that we're not blocking views for drivers and pedestrians around the corners to ensure sight lines are maintained. And I'll turn it back over to Sam for the next steps.
Awesome. So again, our next steps for this project will be to continue to engage the public and stakeholders, of course, answer their questions about the selected design, do any refining to our design based on stakeholder feedback, and then finalize the report. A discussion on implementation will continue internally with the City of Brandon, and of course externally with relevant stakeholders about the various timelines for the project. That would include phasing based on development proposals, and of course fitting changes into the city's capital plan for infrastructure improvements. The city will continue to solicit any available grant opportunities as an option to help fund any of these improvements. So at this point, that kind of brings us to the end of our formal presentation. I just want to remind anybody who's watching the live stream that they can provide any questions or comments to Shengju Li's email address. That's s.lee@brandon.ca. Of course, it's written there on the slide you'll see. You can email if you're watching live, and we'll take some of those questions and have a bit of a discussion and provide as much information now. For those of you who are watching the rebroadcast and missed the live event, that doesn't mean you can't ask questions or make some comments. Please email Shengju, s.lee@brandon.ca at your leisure over the next week or so, and we'll do our best to provide any answers and dialogue on some comments or concerns that with regards to this project. So yeah, at this time, Shengju is just kind of organizing his email just to make sure that any questions that have been sent to him so far have been received. And as they come in, we'll read them off and kind of have a discussion here with our presentation team on that.
Thank you, Sam. We do have one question coming in. Is this video recorded and posted on the website?
Yeah, the project website is on the City of Brandon's current project on their planning page, and for those of you who subscribe to the email chains and lists that the City of Brandon posts out, the video will be available there as a link, but it's also available it'll be available on the city's YouTube page starting, I believe, tomorrow, Friday, the 26th of March, when our IT department can actually unarchive it. So anybody who is watching this rebroadcast will already see it up there, and anybody who's watching this live can take some time to think about questions or email them right away. So just to kind of get the discussion going, some of the new aspects that would be incorporated in this design include a variety of different signage and line work and painting. I'll just flip back to one of the slides there. We'll see here on this slide here at 10th Street, a variety of different signage and line painting. If either Brent or Marcia can give some comments on why we're seeing some green paint and perhaps some different signage there, and what does signage look like for the bikeway itself?
Sure, I can jump in there, Sam. So kind of standard bikeway design has progressed over the years, with often green paint, like you see, which is called conflict paint, is used when you have protected bike facilities crossing through areas of higher conflict or potential risk. And so the idea with the paint is that it's really a visual cue to both drivers and cyclists that this is an area where your paths are crossing, and that protection and barrier that's kind of providing a separation for people biking is no longer present. So it's a visual cue to remind both that there may be conflicts and extra attention is needed. So along with that, you'll see the signage that some of the signage that you're referring to is a yield to passing bike sign. So something that's new with these protected bikeways, and similar to when you have a painted bike lane, is the bike traffic is going to be driving or traveling on the inside of you, and when you're making a right turn, which would for any driver typically be made from the curb lane, you need to be aware that there may be someone biking who is crossing, and so sort of the yield to crossing bike sign provides a little bit of additional awareness for that driver to drive slow and really make sure you're checking your blind spots to see if there's any oncoming cyclists. As for signage for people biking, and with the proposed connection onto 10th Street, this is looking at some future plans that the City of Brandon has, and 10th Street, I believe, has been identified as a future bikeway corridor. And so showing that as that bikeway is developed, that there will be additional facilities that will run north-south on 10th Street to connect in through downtown. And that the way the design is set up is so there may be signage, wayfinding signage for cyclists to direct them towards destinations in downtown Brandon. And then similarly at this all-way stop controlled intersection, you would see smaller stop signs for the cyclists so that they need to stop at the intersection, similar to the way a motor vehicle would.
Awesome. Thanks, Brent. Another common question that that kind of comes forward is why the merge design? I talked a little bit about before how we had come up with the 3 different design options and done a evaluation criteria on those 3 design options. Why did the city not just pick the one that was A, either most preferred by the public, or B, most preferred by administration, and of course, and through this process? And this was something that that our project team had sort of struggled with. We at times looked to try and merge or propose various solutions for any sort of our planning projects to align with public feedback. However, we found here that there was quite a split between the different types of feedback that we would receive. A lot of people had been concerned about protecting cyclists and multimodal traffic on a bikeway that provides also good separation between cyclists and pedestrians, while others thought it was important to preserve the on-street parking in the area. Noticing a shortage of parking in the downtown, we don't want to immediately remove that, recognizing that a lot of people come to the downtown by driving as opposed to walking or cycling. And so we thought that it was important to kind of take the various positives from both designs and kind of merge them together as we've seen through this selected concept. And so if I go back to the locations, we kind of chose 5th Street and 16th Street, 17th Street on either side to make those transitions, as these are the points where it made most sense to have the parking available for kind of some of the existing businesses, but also make utilization of the existing right-of-way there, and kind of marry that with the anticipated build-out of the downtown secondary plan, and how various phasing through that plan and anticipated development would be accommodated through the development of these improvements to the streetscape. So again, it was we didn't want to necessarily ignore the public's feedback, but we wanted to kind of bridge the gap between the varying feedback that we had received. So that was kind of in our thought process with regards to how and why we chose to create or implement a kind of an integrated design of the options 1 and 2.
And maybe, Sam, I'll just build off of that a little bit. I think that anytime you're sort of reimagining what a street is going to look like, it's important to be really context sensitive and recognize that along the corridor there's existing businesses, there's some vacant lots, and sort of recognizing how do you make that transition between what is there now versus maybe what the vision for the street is looking into the future, and make sure the facility type that we're suggesting as our preferred option is consistent with both the current uses and then looking at what those changes might look like in the future. And so I think that some of the benefits that you're able to receive by this hybrid approach allows to ensure that businesses on the north side of the street, existing businesses, are able to continue to operate the way that they have known from the past, but that many of these new amenities that will create a really vibrant streetscape in the future, street trees, landscaping, are available at other sections along the corridor.
Okay, we do have another question coming in. Barry asked, what is the circular feature on the left side of the slide in Gateway option 1 and option 2?
Circular feature on the, so then the circular feature is the plan view, and then what's on the right is essentially the gateway feature. So as part of the gateway feature, you can see a square. I don't know if we can zoom in. A square in the middle of that plaza area. That's essentially what the signage, the column signage on the right will go. And then we're also creating kind of a plaza seating social space area on each of the gateway feature as well. And so a lot of so what you're seeing is essentially like a plaza area plus landscaping around it. So you can see there's some trees with canopy and then some low-lying landscaping plus a bunch of seating area, just to create a bit of character on either end and a place for people to socialize as well. So similarly, you can see along the outside circle, that's essentially where the signage gateway feature would go. So it is long and horizontal, but it's meant to be on a curved edge around the outside of the plaza area.
Thank you, Marsha. Thank you, Marsha. Another question is about the lighting. Is there any lighting for people walking included in this design?
It was brought up it's shown in the option. So if you go back to the option slide, you'll see we haven't chosen a specific one, but we've identified some potential options for the street lighting, but it's meant to, along the corridor, once it goes into a more detailed design, to select more pedestrian scale lighting than what's there today. Along the north side, there is an existing hydro pole, so there would be some need to coordinate with Manitoba Hydro to do the future street lighting improvements. Is there any other questions, Sangju, for the landscaping or?
Not yet.
Okay. Actually, now that we're talking about
go ahead,
landscaping, one of the other consideration that we were also going to make in terms of, don't know if you can go to the design slide 27, Sangju. But in that slide, you can see that there are along the north side, between 8th Street and 11th Street. Yeah, there we go. Along the north side, you can see there's some tree and grates and some trenches that we have options of also doing. And in these ones where we can explore stormwater measures, where we could potentially take some of the street stormwater and into these landscaping areas and do like a bioretention area or like a green infrastructure. So that's something we'll be exploring further as potential options the city can carry forward into future design consideration. And we also introduced decorative crosswalks along the corridor just to enhance the crossing areas for pedestrians, in particular in those middle blocks towards the downtown area. So between like 11th Street and 8th Street.
Yeah, and even though we don't have a specific design for that now, or material types, or if it's just going to be painted or textured, we just kind of noticed that in the concept design of a different shade along those crosswalks there. One of the things too that kind of was important to the city, and I kind of mentioned this a little bit through the presentation with regards to maintaining the existing improvements that we have done in the downtown along Pacific Avenue with the addition of the sidewalk on the north side is keeping a kind of a line of reference point, kind of to improve the impact of the costing on this. And so through this project, you'll notice that the north curb line that you'll see throughout the entire length of the selected design is basically what you see now. So if you're to drive down Pacific Avenue, you can use that north curb line as your reference point, and you would be able to kind of visualize or measure from there where the various elements of the streetscape would be. And we, of course, that minimizes the cost with regards to replacement of the existing curbing in the area. And so we kind of fit the conceptual design around that specific constraint, so as to ensure that we were maintaining good use of our existing infrastructure and not wasting any of the good infrastructure that we have. The curbing and that there. There would be some improvements more on the south side, especially with regards to the bulb outs and the potential movement of some of that curbing to accommodate some of the features there. But we took that into consideration to minimize that there, at least from a costing and implementation perspective. Again, for those of you who may be tuning in, we're looking at the conceptual design of Pacific Avenue. We're doing some public consultation. We've kind of presented the selected design and are taking questions. For those of you who want to engage, you can email s.li@brandon.ca. And send that feedback along if you're watching this live. If you're not watching this live, you can still send your feedback to that same email address that you've seen through the presentation, and we can do our best to continue that dialogue. I just kind of have a question for Urban Systems, and for our viewers here who are watching live or not. Are there any other cities that at least Urban Systems either has been involved with that people can kind of look at for cities that have implemented some streetscape elements that we have kind of shown here, just so they can get a different visual representation of what the city of Brandon is trying to replicate, if they wanted to do their own searches or even one day visit?
Yes, I mean, I can speak to that. There's lots of examples and lots of communities that we've worked with on different elements, and I think that the most local and easiest potentially to get to is in Winnipeg. So there's bike lanes that have been constructed within the Exchange District, so on McDermott and Benetine Avenues, So we were involved with the bike lane design construction, but the streetscape elements that are there is kind of playing to the historical significance of that area in downtown Winnipeg. And so I think that tying some of those landscape features and streetscape features to creating a multimodal corridor that's really vibrant with people walking and biking and sort of creating a dynamic street where there's restaurants and shops, but there's also places for people to relax and use the street in other ways. So I think that's a great local example. Yeah, and probably the easiest one to look to. But there's lots of similar projects that have been completed. I know Marcia is currently working on one in Calgary, which is on Bowness Road, currently under construction. And so there's lots of cities throughout Canada and North America are looking at ways to really make main streets a little bit more vibrant and attract people back to the cores of their cities, where often there's a little bit better density of roads, and it means that it's a little bit easier to get around if you're walking or biking. And so having treatments like this is often a great way to kind of encourage new development and just really bring people into the city so they're able to share the city with their community members.
Awesome. Yeah, it's easy to see things on paper and through presentation, especially in a physical distancing world where we're limited there. But any chance that anybody can take a look at a real world example is really valuable. And so thanks for pointing that out.
And Google Street View is a great tool for that. So there's tons and tons of different things that you can see on Google Street View, and it's kind of neat sometimes to see as well how a street evolves. So you can look through and see. Often many of these corridors were previously pretty auto-oriented, and then as the value in creating a street that is a little bit has more elements that are considered has been strengthened, you can kind of see how not only the street itself, but often the land uses and how vibrant potential businesses are kind of reflect that. So kind of cool to see.
Awesome. Shengju, do we have any other questions?
We don't have any question, but just a comment coming in. Mentioned that glad to see the sidewalk continue on Pacific Avenue. We really need that.
Absolutely.
And I think that was one thing that we didn't dwell on a lot, but not only is the sidewalk now continuous or proposed to be continuous on both the north and south side of the street, but the sidewalk on the south side, which is currently where the majority of the development and buildings exist, is proposed to be widened as well. So it's not only making sure it's continuous, it's also what we were looking to do is to make sure people feel comfortable and that there's enough space for you to walk side by side with your friend, or sort of create an inviting place for people to walk and go to their favorite destinations.
Absolutely.
And maybe just to also add to that, when Brent and I were in town completing the safety study, we noticed like with a lot of the building offset right on the property lines, that the sight lines for cars and drivers on the side street can be difficult at times. And so with the bulb out, that actually helps with some of the sight lines to move the car forward more. So part of this is not just about introducing the cycling facility, but also to improve the facility or the corridor for all modes. So both for transit and for cars and for pedestrians.
Yeah, absolutely. And our departments have been in constant communication with some of the other various departments within the city, and that intersection specifically with the 8th Street Bus Mall is identified as a potential for improvement, and likely may see some of the first phasing of improvement to improve the safety as buses and other vehicles such as loading vehicles, parked vehicles, and of course hopefully cyclists as well will pass through that intersection with as little conflict as possible. So we may start to see some temporary improvements as we plan ahead for more permanent improvements. So. I think we're kind of coming towards the end of our discussion here. As I said, this discussion and time for information sharing is not over, even if it's at the end of the video that you're watching, either live or rebroadcast. I want to take the time to again say that that we are still collecting feedback and can answer some clarifying questions with regards to our selected design as we proceed through the final report, and of course the discussions on implementation and phasing. So again, that contact is going to be through Shengju, and as I have there now on the screen, his email address is s.lee@brandon.ca. And again, this broadcast will be available on the city's YouTube page for rewatching. We thank you all for taking the time this evening to come on out and watch live, or taking the time out of your busy day if you're watching the rebroadcast. And again, please do reach out to us, provide any and all feedback, and we can keep the dialogue going. I want to take some time to thank Marcia and Brent for making themselves available this evening to kind of talk about this project and provide some more details. It's been great to work with them through this, with their expertise, and we're grateful that the City of Brandon can include some of this in our design there. So thank you, Marcia and Brent. And thanks, of course, too, to Shengju for helping with the planning and organization. Shengju is the planner responsible primarily for the downtown, and so with his expertise there, he brings a valuable experience to the table here. So as I said, this kind of concludes our virtual open house. I thank you for tuning in. Please reach out to us if you have any comments or concerns. Otherwise, have a great day.